Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll begin the program in just a few minutes as people continue to enter the webinar. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Harvard Humanitarian Initiatives Careers in Humanitarianism webinar for the month of March. We're thrilled to have you with us, and we have a great panel of team members from HHI who are going to tell you more about the careers in the humanitarian field. Before we begin, I'm just going to give you a little bit of brief background on the logistics of today's event. We'll be here for about an hour, and the first half will be dedicated to our panelists describing their career, the career path, and then the second half of the event will be dedicated for an audience Q&A session. I'd like to invite all of our attendees to submit questions through the Q&A function button found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Simply click that button and submit your questions via text, and we'll try our very best to answer as many questions as possible. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Michael D. St. Aubin. He's a research specialist for the Infectious Diseases and Epidemics program. And in this role, he provides support through developing and maintaining data collection and management systems, managing and training project field staff, developing interactive and visually engaging data surveillance dashboards, among many other things. Michael's background is in architecture and design, where he worked professionally on numerous healthcare and education-related projects in resource-limited countries. Thank you so much for being here today, Michael. And then our second panelist is Emily Ng, who works as the program manager for the Executive Negotiation Project at HHI. Her background is in healthcare fundraising, and she has held various support and grant oversight roles at several large teaching hospitals. She's also had several leadership and research roles centered on the intersection of global security, gender, and health and international development program. Thank you so much, Emily, for being here. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Emily to start us off.
Thank you, Sabrina. Just before we jump in, just want to confirm that the slides are showing correctly. Sabrina?
Yes, you are all set.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for today's Careers in Humanitarianism panel. I first just want to say thank you all for joining on this special International Women's Day. And I just feel honored to be able to present a little bit about my career journey with you all as we celebrate different women's accomplishments in the world today. So as Sabrina mentioned, I am the program manager for the Executive Negotiation Project. This is a project sponsored by USAID that is currently in its second year of programming. How I got here, I am actually from the West Coast. I'm a native Oregonian. I have about 5+ years of work experience, as Sabrina mentioned, across different sectors. I went to Linfield College for my undergraduate education, which is a small liberal arts school outside of Portland, Oregon. I then did a master's in International Affairs and Economics at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, based in Washington, D.C., with also the first year of the program being based in Bologna, Italy. And then just a little bit about me. I have some different interests. I included a couple photos, one being from my graduation experience in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, I was one of those people that was caught in the beginning of the pandemic. So this is actually just in front of the monument, no formal ceremony since we were moved on to Zoom at that time. But then also my graduate travel experience doing field research in Nepal on the bottom right photo. So just a little bit about my travel experience and interests. So leading up to my role today, I spent most of my early career working in healthcare, nonprofit, and fundraising. Through this experience, I was able to work for a few large teaching hospitals, Oregon Health and Science University Foundation, and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is based here in Boston. I think this was the point in my career where I just really got involved in the healthcare sector, but then also initiated that interest to wanting to expand my healthcare research and interest to focus on more global settings. So through these experiences at these large institutions, I really built the career base for myself and learned some fundamental professional skills, which I then used to build up my background to apply for graduate schools, focusing mostly in the international affairs space. So in 2018, I started my graduate career at Johns Hopkins SAIS, moving to Bologna, Italy, which we have a partnership there. So I spent my time in Italy really learning more about European affairs and political economy of Europe, but then also starting to understand different international development programming, looking at labor force migration, international technology use, and a few other areas all across the intersection of gender. So through the first year, I really began building up my international work experience with having an opportunity to also live in Rome for the summer between the 2 years. And then I finalized my career at SAIS by being in Washington, D.C. for the year, but also being a graduate consultant working on, with a local based NGO in Nepal. Since graduating Johns Hopkins SAIS, I've held a few different roles, most immediately after graduation, working in the private sector, working for a public sector consulting practice in Boston. And then now leading up to today, working more in the humanitarian space as a program manager for HHI. So my project, a little bit more about what I do and what our goals are. So as I mentioned, we are sponsored by USAID, and the Executive Negotiation Project is really aimed for a variety of professional audiences, but is full of trainings. It's specifically tailored around humanitarian access negotiations. So we hold a few different training opportunities globally that are for senior leaders, but then also for early to mid-career frontline humanitarian practitioners. So we develop a few different streams of programming to help train these different groups, but to also provide experiences where they connect with their colleagues and learn from each other about their different experiences in the field. Also part of this program is a research element, which is focused on technology and the intersection with humanitarian negotiation and the humanitarian sector more broadly. My role on this project is really kind of project oversight over all of the administrative elements, whether that be financial budgets or focusing on travel logistics and or curriculum development and content production. So just to give a few highlights from our last year of programming, we were able to kick off our on-site residencies back in person after this prolonged time away from each other due to COVID, on-site in Nairobi and Dakar with the Responsible Negotiation for Senior Leaders cohorts. These were really successful trainings of around 24 participants, and really were intensive 3-day residential trainings to build into our hybrid programming, since we had Zoom sessions leading up to these. So these were really dynamic, simulation-based experiences that were really successful so far, and we look forward to having a few more in the coming year. Our other stream of programming is focused on the frontline practitioner audience, and really we've built out a whole learning management system with different curriculum materials, and also are going to be transitioning out of the Zoom environment into Insight starting in April with our first field focus kind of working sessions in Nairobi. So as you can imagine, we've had a major adaptation year and have really seen the benefits of Zoom learning, but also are continuing to have our residential programming. And then lastly, the research element, as I mentioned, we're focusing on some case study research areas, focused on balanced partnerships, community-led innovation, and also inclusion of women and minorities, specifically focusing on technology and how it's being implemented. So all of this is to say, no one's career journey is the same. Starting out from healthcare fundraising, moving into now the humanitarian sector and program management, it's definitely had a lot of learning curves and experiences along the way. So my key takeaways for you all as you're thinking about where you might have a place in this field is to focus on building your interpersonal connections and relationships. You never know where they might lead. I actually stumbled into this role by reconnecting with a former colleague who was working at the Brigham and was able to refer me into this role and really help provide some insights. So you just never know where your connections might lead. Hone your research and data analytics and communication skill sets if you want to contribute to publications and really help build up the programmatic development side of these programs. I think the Johns Hopkins SICE experience really equipped me with this skill set, and I definitely encourage any advanced education or certificate programming to help hone these skills if you are able. And then lastly, just embrace new learning opportunities and be willing to contribute to stretch or out of scope tasks. In this role, you are challenged to wear multiple hats and really be a team member and support other functions of HHI. So I just encourage you to continue to stretch your function and make sure you're always open to supporting your team members in any role you occupy. So I'm sure Sabrina will share more information about how to connect with the panelists and others at HHI, but happy to talk with any of you on LinkedIn, or you can also connect with me via email. And I look forward to hearing your questions and learning more about your career experiences. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. And I will pass it over to Michael.
Thanks. I don't know if I need to have my video on, Sabrina, but it looks like it's disabled.
I think you should be good now.
Okay, thanks. So. I would just like to say I totally agree with Emily on fostering your connections, because yeah, a lot of career paths that that you go down are all having to know with who you know and being at the right place and right time for a lot of things. So I think, yeah, that's just like a really important point to hone in on. But I'll start with my presentation. I'm Michael Aubin. I have two positions at HHI. One is the research specialist for the Infectious Diseases and Epidemics program, and the other is the project coordinator for the Visual Response Simulator tool. I'll start with a bit of background about myself. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and as Sabrina mentioned, my background is actually in architecture. Like probably many of you here, I really have a strong passion for traveling and seeing the world, especially traveling with my wife Ananta, who's from India, where her family and parents live. And for my free time, I like to be creative. I like to draw and paint as well. I have a strong interest in running and biking as both a hobby and for exercise. So I structured this presentation just to kind of go in sequential order of all the sort of influential and transformative experiences that I had that led me down this path. So starting way back when I was in high school, I spent a lot of my spring breaks going on mission trips with my mom's church to both Mexico and Peru. These were really like sort of eye-opening experiences for me. It was really my first time getting abroad and out of my sort of suburban Atlanta bubble. To be honest, I was at the time and still today, I was never really comfortable with the evangelical side of these trips, but I was, for me, they're still really, impactful and transformative. And I loved meeting all these people, and I really gravitated towards the sort of construction aspect of these trips. So like building, whether it's churches or homes for these communities that we're visiting, I really got a lot out of that. And so when I went to college, I studied architecture, and I chose Auburn University because it had this program called Rural Studio, where students get to live in rural and a poor county in Alabama, and you get to design and build structures for the community there. So my class, we built a new home for Rosalie Turner and her two sons that were living with her. So that was just a really great experience for me in school. And while I was in school, I was really hoping to do something like this, along the lines of this professionally. Back then, I still don't know if there's like a good word for this kind of sort of design architecture. We were calling it humanitarian architecture back then, but knowing what I know today, I wouldn't really classify it as that. But anyways, I was really hoping to do this sort of work professionally. So in 2012, when I moved to Boston to work at an architecture firm, I was really excited that the firm had a small group of people that had a good relationship with Partners in Health, and they were doing designing construction projects with Partners in Health. So through that, from a period of 4 years, I got to work on various projects in Haiti and also Rwanda. In Haiti, a lot of them ended up being really just theoretical and sort of conceptual, trying to raise funds, and sometimes they get built. Most of the time they get built, it was in a different form or fashion. Or sometimes the funding just never came through. But fortunately, our project in Rwanda, the University of Global Health Equity, did succeed and was constructed and is active today and is growing as a campus. So that was like a really awesome project to be a part of. But really the most transformative and pivotal point for me working with Partners in Health was in 2015 during the Ebola outbreak. They hired us and some engineers and some contractors to go to West Africa, to Sierra Leone and Liberia, and do hospital facility assessments of the government hospitals that they were partnering with and supporting during the outbreak. And so for me, this was my first real experience in humanitarian work, and first experience in infectious diseases, and truly my first healthcare project ever. So after doing this work with them, I really enjoyed it. I really loved working with the doctors. I knew that I had the bug, and this is what I wanted to be doing with my career full time. I couldn't just be going back to working in corporate architecture. So in 2016, I enrolled into the Harvard Graduate School of Design and got my master's in design studies with a concentration in risk and resilience. At design school, I took a step back from just typical architecture. My degree was more research focused, and I ended up getting into more computer science through mapping and data visualization. And so exploring those realms, but also, keeping focus on my interest in getting into the humanitarian field. So I was taking a lot of the HHI-based courses, where, one of them is the simulation course, where you go into the state park for 3 days and you have a humanitarian crisis simulation. And so those are all really, really influenced the direction where I have ended up today. So after graduation, I was working on my thesis project, which is this image down in the middle, which is an Ebola outbreak simulator, a map-based visual and interactive simulator. I was asked by Enzo, who's at HHI, to maybe spend the summer working on it some more, because at that time the DRC outbreaks were just starting to happen in 2018. And so I was doing that at HHI, and then my first official position at HHI was actually the project coordinator for Kobo Toolbox. So if you guys don't know, this is Humanitarian based mobile and electronic data collection tool. It's built for humanitarians, but it's free for everyone to use, and it's grown substantially, and it's got hundreds of thousands of users now throughout the world, but it's actually based here at HHI. And so I had a role as a project coordinator on the team. This was my first experience sort of on a tech team. So it was really good to learn about that and how the workflows of working with developers. And then also it's my first real experience into like data collection and form building and getting that sort of experience. So it was really good for me. But while during this time, I was actually starting to work with the infectious disease program on their projects that we're starting, as well as looking for funding opportunities for my thesis project, which we actually eventually got, which has been really great. So now we're in the middle of the grant now. It took a while. You can see there was a 2-year period where this funding hadn't come through, and it's been sort of a slow process because of COVID and other things to get the project going. But now we have a full team around the project. We have PI, we have GIS people, infectious disease modeler, and also a video game developer. So we're kind of rebuilding my thesis project, but in the more proper way to do it with the full team on board with the actual experts. So that's one of the things that I'm working on at HHI right now. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, I started working with the infectious disease program. I'm the research specialist on the team. I deal a lot with the data collection and management aspects of the work, but all sorts of things. Responsibilities range far and wide, but the work that we do is mostly funded through the CDC, and we work in the Dominican Republic and Honduras. And so we have a wide range of projects, both healthcare setting and community setting, where we do infectious disease related research. A lot of it is serology testing and stuff like that. And so this has been a really great opportunity for me to get these sort of hands-on and real hands-on experience in the infectious disease field. And through this, a lot of sort of like where my design, I get to employ my design skills is through, as Sabrina mentioned, a lot of like data monitoring and visualization dashboards, so that we can sort of track the progress of all our different projects that we have going on and sort of monitor what the data is looking like as it comes in and start doing some preliminary analysis on the data. So that's really a lot of the stuff that I get to do. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. And I'd like to invite Emily back into the Zoom to start the Q&A session. So I guess I do have one question. What are the challenges of working in the field, and how do you manage and cope with the stress that comes along with it?
Is that to either of us?
Either of you can answer.
Emily, I'll let you go first. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thanks for that question. I think one challenge is, at least for me personally, is just feeling a sense of, I think, attachment to the people you're serving and the beneficiaries. Just in, as of late with the ongoing Ukraine situation, we just did a Zoom training in the fall for more hard to reach areas in negotiation humanitarian access. And we had an Eastern Ukraine cohort. And so in engaging with that group through that training and keeping that dialogue going now with this ongoing humanitarian crisis, it's just been really challenging thinking of those participants, but then also communicating with them and trying to get the support they need. So I think there is just an inherent attachment for me, and just trying to make sure that people have the right tools at the right time and the right resources. So you sometimes feel like you can't do enough to make sure that people who are benefiting from your programs are actually, getting the on the ground resources. So I think that's a key challenge for me.
Yeah, sort of echoing that. Yeah, working in the field, yeah, you just have to really stay flexible, because if you're someone that like just needs like set things, then it's going to be really difficult, because things are sort of ever changing, and people like getting resources, like Emily said, to to where you need to go to be able to do the projects that you need to do sometimes gets caught up, and it takes a lot longer in some of these settings. As well as like sometimes like the most difficult thing is the administrative side, like the headquarters office, like going through Brigham and Harvard, like their sort of policies can trickle down and really affect and limit what we can do in the field, and sort of slow things down and push things off when, you know, sometimes things are really urgent. Like, and so, yeah, that I think that would be actually probably the biggest challenge that we face.
Great, thank you. So another question that came in was, what recommendations do you have for those who want to work in a humanitarian program, but not necessarily via research? That is for both of you.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of got into research just by following the opportunities that were open for me. It wasn't super intentional, but I think if you're looking more just to get into, you know, I guess practical positions where you're actually like in the field doing humanitarian work, you just got to look for those organizations that are doing the work that you're interested in and apply and try to meet the people that are working there. For me, I ended up here because these are the people that I knew as I was gaining experience, and so that's where I ended up. But I think it's important also to sort of know about both sides of the work, both the research and the implementation. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Michael said, but also just, I guess, just being thorough in your review of the organizations and the roles you're applying for. I think my position is a little bit more training oriented than Michael's, for example, but there is still, of course, some research and curriculum design elements that I think are just going to be inherent to any role you occupy, even if you are more focused on the implementation side, because you have to have a thorough understanding of the people you're serving, but then also of the needs of the region. So I think having that research skill set and background is always going to benefit you, but more practical and implementation and more hands-on work sometimes can also come through volunteering outside of maybe even your current role. We have an upcoming simulation at the end of April. That's like a really great intro into what some of those experiences might look like. Though it is fictional at this time, it is just, I think, a really good way to get a lens into what the field experience might be like. So I think there's a variety of ways you can engage with the work.
Great, thank you. Both of you had touched upon the connections that you had made and how they were really, really valuable for where you are in your career today. Would you be able to talk about your mentors and, you know, how they've helped you, if they've given you any information, any advice that you would want to share with the audience?
I can speak of two of my mentors that are like coming to mind that were really pivotal for me. Was one when I was working in architecture. His name was Gerard. He was the project manager on a lot of these Partners in Health projects, and he's a Haitian citizen, but living and working in Boston. And when I started working at the firm, he knew that I had done the Rural Studio and I had sort of interest in these sort of projects that he was working on. So just, you know, having those early discussions with him when I first started working there sort of led to when these projects would come up, he would ask me if I wanted to be involved, and I was always saying yes. And so just getting like in his radar, and, you know, having him know that what, you know, interests me and the experience that I wanted led to like these opportunities. And yeah, the one crazy email I got in 2015 is like, hey, do you want to go to West Africa and to Sierra Leone and Liberia? And I was like, of course, yeah, let's go. So Gerard, and he was great. I worked on projects with him for 3 or 4 years at Shepley, and then here at HHI, working with Eric Nilles, who is the PI for Infectious Disease and Epidemics program. I think he's really valued my outsider experience and what I can bring to the table, and he's really supported me in, like, you know, pursuing, you know, trying to integrate as much as I can, like, you know, sort of design into the work that we're doing, and thinking of things differently. And he's even let me run with a couple of my own small projects. So like just having him see the value and giving me the opportunities has been like super critical. Yeah, I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing without either of those to people in my career.
I think for me, I'm still relatively, newer to HHI. I started in July 2021, so I'm still developing kind of that mentor relationship here. But in my previous roles, especially at Dana-Farber, and that's even kind of what led me to this role, is just continuing to keep the relationships with people who were my managers or, higher up in leadership positions, because they, through those roles, I was able to demonstrate, my competencies and my interests in moving to more of a global profession, and, got the references and support to attend graduate school. So I think through that and those mentor relationships, I was encouraged to, seek out higher education and continue growing. And then while at SAIS, I had a mix of different professors and mentors and professional colleagues, and even my classmates, really, because there's such a range and people with different experiences. So I had mentorship also through just my class connections that provided a really great insight into different sectors and helped me very much so narrow down where I wanted to land. So I think just keeping and maintaining connections with your classmates, or maybe just even your professional colleagues. It doesn't have to always be someone who's more senior than you. Someone who is also your peer can be, very influential in your career. So I just encourage you to keep the connections.
Great. So we've actually been getting a lot of questions related to the balance between personal and professional life. Someone was wondering, how do you balance, working in the field with family and mental health?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I think HHI does a really great job at, having the flexibility built in to your role. I think there's a widespread understanding that if I'm doing a workshop for a whole week where it's like an intensive residential training, that it could be kind of a lighter workload the next week, or more less emotionally draining tasks that'll be focused on in the following week. I'm not sure if that's how it is for your program, Michael, but I think there is just a really nice balance and recognition by leadership that you are stretched thin when you're doing more on-site, hands-on connection with participants, but then also there's just space to build your schedule to be a little bit more flexible and accommodating for that. And then for the mental health resources, I think we have a really nice peer network at HHI, especially among kind of the program management cohort, because we're all kind of similar ages, similar professional backgrounds, similar interests. So I think there's just a really nice culture here at HHI that you can be transparent and talking about your different issues you're having on your programming. I know, like Michael was alluding to, with the administrative pains of being a program manager, I vent with my colleagues all the time. So I think there is just that great peer network here. But then also the Brigham and Harvard, since we are under two large institutions, parent organizations, they have a lot of different mental health, therapy resources and support systems built in. So definitely a lot of different things you can tap into.
Yeah, I guess from my end, it's definitely tough. It's like for sure a balancing act, but it's just something that it's like really important to make sure that you maintain a balance for your mental health, and just make sure you don't miss out on life, because there's a ton of work that needs to be done, and you really just kind of have to set boundaries. And so for me, I have two positions, so that gets kind of tough because there's everything's squeezed in to the week, and I've been able to work it out with both of my teams, where generally the early part of the week, Monday and Tuesday, I'm mostly focused on Beer's work, and then Wednesday and Thursday I'm mostly focused on IDEP work, and then Friday's sort of like a split day between the two. And sometimes the work bleeds into the days when the not the unassigned days, but that's just that's just how it has to be sometimes. But generally both teams have been able to respect that, and so I've been able to like really focus on the work that is at hand, and not just get sort of overloaded each day with different things that need to be done. So that's really helped. And then for me, I have to like I have to go run or ride my bike or something like once a day. I just have to like get out of my house and just like take a break. And then you know, me and my wife, we like to paint a lot. So like we just like, you know, take breaks from screens and do stuff like that, just to like kind of like, yeah, disconnect and sort of do something else that's more just like fun and creative. So it's definitely hard. And, you know, sometimes there's late nights and sometimes there's weekend work and stuff like that, especially when you're traveling. But you just have to do your best really to set these boundaries and make sure that people you're working with, you know, understand.
Great, thank you. Michael, we actually have a question directed to you regarding how you got into data analysis and computer science without having a degree in that field. Are there any tools, courses, recommendations for someone who's interested in that intersection of humanitarian aid and big data?
Sure, yeah. So it happened through taking courses while I was in grad school. Didn't have any experience at all before going to grad school in that department. But since my degree was more research focused, we had different seminar courses, and I took a mapping course where they taught you how to work with GIS. And then that was like the initial course. And then this is taught by Bobby Petrusco, who I think he's leaving the GSD. I'm not sure if it's, you know, this course is even available anymore. But the second part of the course, or the sequel, was you know, taking GIS and then building simulation models with the GIS data. So that's where my thesis project stemmed from, was taking that course and you know, pulling together my interests and ideas into this sort of simulation methods that he was geospatial simulation methods that he was teaching us. So that was really, yeah, impactful and influential on me. And then because I started getting interested and I like started being able to code a little bit, I got excited about it, and I took more courses, and I took a design course where I partnered with a computer science student, and then I also took an MIT data visualization course, and that's where I learned more about data visualization and also web development and that sort of stuff. And so it kind of was a little bit organic, and I would definitely say I'm not a computer programmer by any means, but I have a lot more familiarity with it now. I can do some things, but I think me as more of a design focused person, like being able to work with computer scientists is like yeah, really a good skill to have picked up.
Great, thank you. So another question that's coming in is about, you know, the skill set needed to work in the humanitarian field. What skills are in highest demand currently, and are there any major criteria that someone should consider when working internationally or locally in the humanitarian field? This can be answered by both of you.
A couple that are just top of mind. I think having, you know, emotional intelligence and like the range to pick up on different environments and settings is huge in this role. It's just, you're not always walking into the same situation depending on what country you're in, what training group you're working with, what research areas you're focusing on. So it definitely takes some adaptability and some emotional intelligence and recognition of the different people you're surrounded by. And then I think also just having a strong attention to detail and writing and research skill set is really big, just because even if you aren't, you know, necessarily just a researcher, if you are doing the, you know, actual implementation and running the trainings, you have to be able to reflect and do some monitoring and evaluation on your part. So being able to concretely identify the outcomes from your programs and track programmatic progress, and being able to understand how you can improve and adapt the programming is really huge. And then lastly, I think you just have to have a willingness to kind of go anywhere and do anything. Often it's not really something I'm doing is not in my job description or in my skill set, but I'm jumping in and trying to learn from the people around me as much as possible. And, you know, I have several different travel experiences coming up, and it does make for a really packed travel schedule, but also it forces you to learn, you know, more things on the ground, and you are really able to grow and learn professionally. So I think just willingness to jump in.
I guess for me, I think it's important to know your strengths. And for me, having the design background is fairly unique in this field. So I was able to use those skills to my advantage. And take opportunities where within my team, other people don't have those skills. So I was able to like sort of focus on that aspect of the work a lot. But I think it's really important just like to know not everyone's going to be good at everything. So like your team build up, like who you're working with is really important. So like people complement each other. And I feel like in the infectious diseases and also the VIRS project, like everyone really is like really, really good. Everyone's like a great team member, and everyone's really good at what they do, and balancing the work of the programs. And yeah, I would agree with Emily that, yeah, just be willing and open to do whatever. Like I think all skills are useful, especially the interpersonal skills, and just, I don't know, I guess that kind of stuff also just comes through experience and getting out in the field and meeting people and going through different experiences. So that really helps. But yeah, for me, it's just I had a set of skills that a lot of people here did not. So I was able to use that to my advantage.
Great, thank you. Emily, a lot of people have been showing interest in the course that's going to be happening in Nairobi. And they were wondering if you could just tell a little bit more about it. Who is the course aimed at, and what are the programmatic goals?
Yeah, this is where I also have a shameless plug for Sabrina to just link in our program webpage. But as part of the Foundational Frameworks in Humanitarian Negotiation workshop series, we have two elements. And so the first one is a 3-day intensive remote workshop that we do. And then that same cohort will have a follow-up on-site field working group sessions where that's a little bit more simulation based and a little bit more dynamic. And so the two complementary parts of the workshop are really developed so that people can build or learn and develop different humanitarian negotiation approaches and learn different models for stakeholder management, how to find commonalities with your negotiation counterpart, and different experiences in terms of humanitarian access negotiations. So unfortunately, the Nairobi application closed just a few weeks ago, as it's already underway. We just had the first part last week. But we do have other locations opening up. Bogota is the next one coming up at end of March, which you can still apply. And then we have Amman and Bangkok also coming up in the next month or so. And so each of these will have a remote and then on-site portion. But it's really aimed for an audience of more mid-level frontline practitioners. So people from the region and people who are working in one of those regions and more on site, and they can be part of a local team for international NGO, but we're kind of really trying to target more local and regional audiences. So feel free to apply or to reach out to learn more about that experience.
Great, thank you. And then for both of you, do you have any recommendations for people who want to get more of an educational background in the humanitarian field, or any, if they want to get involved in research, if you have any suggestions for courses or programmings that they might be able to engage in?
I guess for me, I would just look into all the schools, because like at Harvard, at least all the different schools, like I think some of them, they have sort of related classes. So just see what is out there. Like check out the design school. Maybe there's something that there's a lot of people in design that want to be involved in humanitarian issues and are doing a lot of work. And so it could be really interesting for someone that's sort of outside of the design field to look into those courses and see what they do there. Like the Kennedy School, the School of Public Health, the law school, they all have sort of related sort of courses. So I would like look all around, but for me, when I was in design school, taking the HHI related courses was really, helpful. Taking the field simulation course, and then also Fong and Greg Greenow's course. I'm I'm blanking on the actual title course, but it was like field implementation of research in the humanitarian field. So those were really good courses that I would highly recommend. The simulation, I can't recommend it enough. It's very good if you want to see and get experience of what it's like working as a humanitarian aid worker.
Yeah, I echo what Michael said. I can't, underline enough how transformative my experience was at Johns Hopkins. But there's a handful of different programs like the public policy program at Harvard, but also there's SEPA at Columbia. There's American University has a similar program. So there's a lot of other programs that are similar in function. I will say, just keep in mind kind of what is the goal position you're trying to reach through doing one of those programs. I think looking back, there's just a different concentration route I could have taken, or you can even try and combine it with a law degree or an MBA if you're trying to move into more of a business development side. So just really be intentional with what you're doing. But if advanced, like a 2-year higher education program is not as accessible for you, at Harvard Extension School, they have certification programs which are more condensed and a little bit more affordable, I think. And there's some really great areas like food resiliency, data analysis, and more in Michael's space, but then also in international affairs. So I'd say you can also look into, less of a commitment for a program if that's not kind of the route you want to take, or you don't have the time. So there's tons of opportunities out there.
Great. Another question is, what would you say to someone that has a strong interest for research, but they've spent more time on the operational level and don't really know how or where to start in the research field? I think this question would probably be more related to Michael, but yeah.
I guess for me, it's more just the people I was working with, and that's the work that they were doing. I think the infectious diseases program, it's both research and operational. A lot of our outputs are papers that are getting published, but what's even maybe more important to us is working directly with the Ministry of Health and the governments and sort of giving them the feedback loop of the data that we're collecting as we're doing it, so they can make sort of real-time decisions in practice based off of the data that we're generating and the research that we're doing. To get more, if you want to switch from more operational to research, it might require to go back to school to do a more research-based degree where you get more experience, whether it's through writing or qualitative analysis or more into statistical analysis. I'm not too sure the best way forward to make that switch. But I would just say, explore your options. Both, if you're already working professionally, look for options that are more research-based, more teams that are doing more research-based work. But if you're still fairly young, and maybe looking at a school program would be a good idea.
I can also just add one point here. Offer your services up to, if you have like a leader in your institution that's working on something, like try and co-author something, or do the less fun part of the research writing that they don't really want to do, like the analysis side, or like going through data, or just try and offer yourself up to things outside of your role if you can.
Great. So what is the most rewarding aspect of your career for both of you?
It's a good question. For me, it's when ideas become materialized, and then it's then used by people. So like these dashboards that I make, when it's like the actual people in the country that are using them to monitor the data and to inform their decisions, and it's understandable and really useful to them, like that to me is like super exciting. So it's like the same like when I was in architecture, once the building's complete and you go visit it and people are using the building how you envisioned, like it's really rewarding. So for me, it's when all of this sort of planning and ideas come to fruition after you execute, and you get to see like sort of the beneficiaries using what you've done or benefiting from it. So that's, yeah, for me, the most fulfilling part.
Actually was going to say more of the same. Just after you do all the planning and you make it through all the administrative barriers and you're actually like on site in the room with these amazing professionals, seeing the trainings unfold is kind of the most rewarding part of it. I will also say it's been really great being at HHI and working with the different faculty and the PIs that we have here. It's just so like such a wealth of knowledge, and their experiences that they've had are just like amazing to learn from. So being at HHI has been kind of the pinnacle of research and also academic and also medical implementation. So really cool overlap between this different fields.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would like to add, yeah, just getting to know and working with the people both here and in the countries that you're working with is a super great part of it. I love meeting people on each trip and getting to know them. Like you have all the communication via Zoom and email, but like really when you like get to meet them in person, it's like, yeah, it turns into this whole other thing. Yeah.
Great. So I see that we're coming up to the hour. So for the final question, do you have any advice, words of wisdom that you would want to give to youth, young people just beginning their career in the humanitarian field?
I can go first. I would just say, stay optimistic and stay persistent. If it's something that you really want to do, opportunities will come. You just have to really, be dedicated to it and just to keep seeking out those opportunities. And through those opportunities, more will come. So I would just say, for me, the key thing has been persistence and like just really focused on forming this path. Yeah.
I would say don't apply too much pressure on yourself. I think for a lot of you, when I saw my colleagues coming out of the Johns Hopkins SICE experience, it's like you expect your first role you get to be like that amazing humanitarian sector experience. And it's just not always the case, but positions that you take, because maybe it's the right timing or your skills can only get you to this role. You just never know what the combination is. It will definitely provide you with some sort of professional takeaway and lead you on the path you want to go. So just there's always something to take away from every role. So it might just not be the perfect squarely fit into the like thing you're envisioning, but don't shy away from it.
Great. Thank you so much to the both of you. So on behalf of the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. This event is a monthly webinar series that we host along with other humanitarian focused webinars. So follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and our website for any updates on our job openings or future events and announcements. And our webinars are recorded, so they will be posted on our YouTube account, which can be found at the Harvard Humanitarian. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you so much for joining us today. Thank you very much to the panelists, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Sabrina. Nice.
Thank you.
Y'all. Thank you.